Welcome to Ethiopia Today.
Why the past 10 years of American life have been uniquely stupid. What would it have been like to live in Babel in the days after its destruction, Jonathan asks. Jonathan Haidt is a social psychologist at the New York University Stern School of Business. He is the author of The Righteous Mind and the co-author of The Coddling of the American Mind, which originated as a September 2015 Atlantic story. In the book of Genesis, Jonathan continued, we are told that the descendants of Noah built a great city in the land of Shinar. They built a tower with its top in the heavens to make a name for themselves. God was offended by the hubris of humanity and said, look, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech. The text does not say that God destroyed the tower, but in many popular renderings of the story he does. So let's hold that dramatic image in our minds, people wandering amid the ruins, unable to communicate, condemned to mutual incomprehension. The story of Babel is the best metaphor I have found for what happened to America in the 2010s, and for the fractured country we now inhabit, Jonathan added. Something went terribly wrong, very suddenly. We are disoriented, unable to speak the same language or recognize the same truth. We are cut off from one another and from the past. It's been clear for quite a while now that Red America and Blue America are becoming like two different countries claiming the same territory, with two different versions of the Constitution, economics, and American history. But Babel is not a story about tribalism. It's a story about the fragmentation of everything. It's about the shattering of all that had seemed solid, the scattering of people who had been a community. It's a metaphor for what is happening not only between red and blue, but within the left and within the right, as well as within universities, companies, professional associations, museums, and even families. Babel is a metaphor for what some forms of social media have done to nearly all of the groups and institutions most important to the country's future. And to us as a people, Jonathan continued. How did this happen? And what does it portend for American life? By the way, this in-depth observation and analysis of Jonathan for America is more or less related to what we briefly observed similar negative role of the social media on Ethiopia's current situation. It is well-known fact that the Western mainstream media contributed significantly to the prolonging of the Tigray War and widespread instability in Ethiopia, particularly during the last quarter of the 2021. However, such Western media influence now has relatively been reduced. But the intense engagement and interactions of the social media on the hot and sensitive issues of the country are taking over that negative role, which is harmful to the national unity and reconciliation processes. We will come back later on the case of Ethiopia. Let's hear what Jonathan has to say about this. The rise of the modern tower. There is a direction to history, and it is toward cooperation at larger scales. We see this trend in biological evolution, in the series of major transitions through which multicellular organisms first appeared and then developed new symbiotic relationships. We see it in cultural evolution too, as Robert Wright explained in his 1999 book, Non-Zero: The Logic of Human Destiny. Wright showed that history involves a series of transitions, driven by rising population density plus new technologies. Writing, roads, the printing press that created new possibilities for mutually beneficial trade and learning. Zero-sum conflicts, such as the wars of religion that arose as the printing press spread heretical ideas across Europe, were better thought of as temporary setbacks, and sometimes even integral to progress. Those wars of religion, he argued, made possible the transition to modern nation-states with better-informed citizens. President Bill Clinton praised Non-Zero's optimistic portrayal of a more cooperative future thanks to continued technological advance. The early internet of the 1990s, with its chat rooms, message boards, and email, exemplified the non-zero thesis, as did the first wave of social media platforms which launched around 2003. MySpace, Friendster, and Facebook made it easy to connect with friends and strangers to talk about common interests, for free, and at a scale never before imaginable. By 2008, Facebook had emerged as the dominant platform, with more than 100 million monthly users on its way to roughly 3 billion today. In the first decade of the new century, social media was widely believed to be a boon to democracy. What dictator could impose his will on an interconnected citizenry? What regime could build a wall to keep out the internet? The high point of techno-democratic optimism was arguably 2011, a year that began with the Arab Spring and ended with the global Occupy movement. That is also when Google Translate became available on virtually all smartphones. So you could say that 2011 was the year that humanity rebuilt the Tower of Babel. We were closer than we had ever been to being one people, and we had effectively overcome the curse of division by language. For techno-democratic optimists, it seemed to be only the beginning of what humanity could do. In February 2012, as he prepared to take Facebook public, Mark Zuckerberg reflected on those extraordinary times and set forth his plans. Today, our society has reached another tipping point, he wrote in a letter to investors. Facebook hoped to rewire the way people spread and consume information by giving them the power to share. It would help them to once again transform many of our core institutions and industries. In the 10 years since then, Zuckerberg did exactly what he said he would do. He did rewire the way we spread and consume information. In February 2012, he did transform our institutions, and he pushed us past the tipping point. It has not worked out as he expected. Things fall apart. Historically, civilizations have relied on shared blood, gods and enemies to counteract the tendency to split apart as they grow. But what is it that holds together large and diverse secular democracies such as the United States and India, or, for that matter, modern Britain and France? Social scientists have identified at least three major forces that collectively bind together successful democracies: social capital, extensive social networks with high levels of trust, strong institutions, and shared stories. Social media has weakened all three. To see how, we must understand how social media changed over time, and especially in the several years following 2009. In their early incarnations, platforms such as MySpace and Facebook were relatively harmless. They allowed users to create pages on which to post photos, family updates, and links to the mostly static pages of their friends and favorite bands. In this way, early social media can be seen as just another step in the long progression of technological improvements. From the postal service through the telephone to email and texting that helped people achieve the eternal goal of maintaining social time. But gradually, social media users became more comfortable sharing intimate details of their lives with strangers and corporations. Jonathan continued, as I wrote in a 2019 Atlantic article with Tobias Rose Stockers, and they became more adept at putting on performances and managing their personal activities that might impress others but that do not deepen friendships in the way that a private phone conversation would. Once social media platforms had trained users to spend more time performing and less time connecting, the stage was set for the major transformation which began in 2009, the intensification of viral dynamics. Babel is not a story about triumphs, it's a story about the fragmentation of everything. Before 2009, Facebook had given users a simple timeline, a never-ending stream of content generated by their friends and connections, with the newest posts at the top and the oldest ones at the bottom. This was often overwhelming in its volume, but it was an accurate reflection of what others were posting. That began to change in 2009, when Facebook offered users a way to publicly like posts with the click of a button. That same year, Twitter introduced something even more powerful: the retweet button, which allowed users to publicly endorse a post while also sharing it with all of their followers. Facebook soon copied that innovation with its own share button, which became available to smartphone users in 2012. Like and share buttons quickly became standard features of most other platforms. Shortly after, its like button began to produce data about what best engaged its users. Facebook developed algorithms to bring each user the content most likely to generate a like or some other interaction, eventually including the share as well. Later research showed that posts that trigger emotions, especially anger at outgroups, are the most likely to be shared. By 2013, social media had become a new game, with dynamics unlike those in 2008. If you were skillful or lucky, you might create a post that would go viral and make you internet famous for a few days. If you blundered, you could find yourself buried in hateful comments. Your posts rode to fame or ignominy based on the clicks of thousands of strangers, and you in turn contributed thousands of clicks to the game. This new game encouraged dishonesty and mob dynamics. Users were guided not just by their true preferences, but by their past experiences of reward and punishment, and their prediction of how others would react to each new action. One of the engineers at Twitter who had worked on the retweet button later revealed that he regretted his contribution because it had made Twitter a nastier place. As he watched Twitter mobs forming through the use of the new tool, he thought to himself, "We might have just handed a 4-year-old a loaded weapon." As a social psychologist who studies emotion, morality, and politics, "I saw this happening too," Jonathan added. The newly tweaked platforms were almost perfectly designed to bring out our most moralistic and least reflective selves. The volume of outrage was shocking. It was just this kind of twitching and explosive spread of anger that James Madison had tried to protect us from as he was drafting the U.S. Constitution. The framers of the Constitution were excellent social psychologists. They knew that democracy had an Achilles heel because it depended on the collective judgment of the people, and democratic communities are subject to the turbulency and weakness of unruly passions. The key to designing a sustainable republic, therefore, was to build in mechanisms to slow things down, cool passions, require compromise, and give leaders some insulation from the mania of the moment while still holding them accountable to the people periodically, on Election Day. From the October 2018 issue, America is Living James Madison's Nightmare. The tech companies that enhanced virality from 2009 to 2012 brought us deep into Madison's nightmare. Many authors quote his comments in Federalist Note 10 on the innate human proclivity toward faction, by which he meant our tendency to divide ourselves into teams or parties that are so inflamed with mutual animosity that they are much more disposed to vex and oppress each other than to cooperate for their common good. But that essay continues on to a less quoted yet equally important insight about democracy's vulnerability to triviality. Madison notes that people are so prone to factionalism that where no substantial occasion presents itself, the most frivolous and fanciful distinctions have been sufficient to kindle their unfriendly passions and excite their most violent conflict. Social media has both magnified and weaponized the frivolous. Is our democracy any healthier now that we've had Twitter brawls over Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's tax the rich dress at the annual Met Gala, and Melania Trump's dress at a 9/11 memorial event, which had stitching that kind of looked like a skyscraper? How about Senator Ted Cruz's tweet criticizing Big Bird for tweeting about getting his COVID vaccine? It's not just the waste of time and scarce attention that matters. It's the continual chipping away of trust. An autocracy can deploy propaganda or use fear to motivate the behaviors it desires. But a democracy depends on widely internalized acceptance of the legitimacy of rules, norms, and institutions. Blind and irrevocable trust in any particular individual or organization is never warranted. But when citizens lose trust in elected leaders, health authorities, the courts, the police, universities, and the integrity of elections, then every decision becomes contested. Every election becomes a life and death struggle to save the country from the other side. We will bring the following part on our next video.
Are you looking for professional website and secure web hosting services? If so, you have come to the right place. Everything you can imagine is real. For us, impossible is just an opinion. As all our experts are highly professional and friendly, the digital home of your business is in safe hands and no more technical pressure on you. If you require a charity website, we have 20% off. Our team has already delivered great projects with highest standards which our customers always love. We are a forward-thinking team and hunger to deliver more and help. Let's bring your dreams into reality. Get in touch today. Contact at ethiopiatodayofficial.org.
Thanks for staying with us. If you enjoyed our presentation, give us a like and share to your social contacts. And also don't forget to subscribe and tap on the notification bell if this is your first time. Please also check on our collection of favorites on the description section below. See you on our next video. Many thanks.
Contact at ethiopiatodayofficial.org.